Newswatch. Well, one of the biggest news story this year has been this report by the ABC's Four Corners on the alleged abuse of juveniles in detention in the Northern Territory.
The image you've just seen isn't from Guantanamo Bay or Abu Ghraib, but Australia in 2015. This is juvenile justice in the Northern Territory, a system that punishes troubled children instead of rehabilitating them.
In 10 hours of seeing that show, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull called a royal commission. He never asked if the show was in fact biased, whether it left out important facts. Well, I've shown here before that it had. For instance, it left out the very violent background of the young man it falsely claimed was the victim of Abu Ghraib-style torture. But now, our Northern Territory correspondent, Matt Cunningham, has uncovered a letter written by the ABC journalist who did that report, Caro Meldrum-Hanna, that shows, yes, indeed, important facts known to the ABC were left out. Joining me to go through this letter from the ABC to the Northern Territory Justice Minister, John Elferink, is Matt Cunningham. Matt, thanks for your time, mate. Can you tell me first what is this letter? What is it exactly?
Well, Andrew, this was a letter that Four Corners sent to John Elferink, who was the Corrections Minister at the time, basically putting its case to allow them to be shown through correctional facilities in the Northern Territory. Now, they say that they had applied and been granted permission from the Corrections Department to do 2 days of filming, and that had then been revoked. So they sent this letter to John Elferink, the Corrections Minister, asking his permission, asking him if they could be taken through those facilities. And basically in that letter, they outlined the great work, in their words, that that John Elferink had done in this area in reforming the corrections facilities.
Well, let's get to that, because a few paragraphs did jump out at me, mate. The ABC told Elferink that based on its research, the NT government was proactively trying to make things better for juveniles in detention. It then listed things done under Elferink's watch, moving juveniles to a facility at Berrima, appointing a new corrections commissioner, went on to give more examples I'm not showing there, education courses, jobs programs. And the ABC then laid on the praise like butter. It said, Minister Elferink, this is a significant legacy. It's also your legacy. Matt, did any of that praise, any of that acknowledgement of changes actually made, make it into the show that Malcolm Turnbull saw?
Well, not much, Andrew, you'd have to say. I watched it again this morning. There's only about 3 or so minutes that are devoted to John Elferink, and about 40 seconds of that is devoted to that incident where he asked the reporter to come for a ride on his motorbike. Now, that is another issue that is of concern to the government. They have indicated, the Chief Minister Adam Giles said yesterday, that they will be making a formal complaint to the ABC about that report. So the couple of issues that they're concerned about are, one, that they weren't given a fair say in that story, that it wasn't a balanced report, and also perhaps that it was a bit of a hatchet job. That letter that Four Corners did send to John Elferink said that it did say in that letter that we don't do gotcha moments, and I think that, that John Elferink is certainly of the opinion now that it was one.
I want viewers to see exactly what you're talking about, because you've put your finger on it, mate. First, all those changes it said in the letter that Elferink had made, no, it didn't get in the program. In fact, it suggested, what was actually screened, suggested the opposite, no changes at all. Have a look.
Minister Elferink moved the children here, to the old asbestos-ridden Berrima Jail for adults. The mistreatment of children has continued.
Now, Matt, I want to pick up on one of the points you just made about the motorbike incident. Now, the program went out of its way to make Elferink seem that he didn't care. He was a cowboy. Here is an example.
I am the Minister for Corrections, not the Minister for kicking the shit out of people. And hopefully we can actually create an environment which corrects. There you go. Okay. You want to ride back into town now or what?
I have my own ride, thank you very much.
Oh, I thought Minister. You wanted to have a go on the bike, that's all.
And then, as you say, Matt, it went on to show him, Elferink, riding his Harley. What can you tell me about that grab?
Well, the interesting thing is there are people within the government who are now saying that Four Corners actually asked the Corrections Minister, John Elferink, to ride his motorbike to Don Dale. Now, Four Corners deny that, but that is what the people within the government are saying. They're also saying that that John Elferink spent about 8 hours with Four Corners going through some of those correctional facilities, and they're a little bit miffed as to why most of that 8 hours of footage was left on the cutting room floor, and yet that 40-second clip that you see there of him offering the reporter a ride made it into the report. They wonder what the relevance of that actually was.
Well, I know what the relevance was. It's to make him look like a Northern Territory hick. And, you know, that gotcha moment, like, you're quite right. I mean, why an experienced politician, knowing that it's the ABC, devotes 8 hours knowing they'll only take 10 seconds, that's stupid, but there you go. That gotcha moment, Matt, does that square with this promise in the ABC's letter that the ABC was not interested in gotcha moments? Your opinion?
Well, my opinion probably doesn't matter, Andrew, but I think the government's opinion and what they'll be putting in the complaint that they make to the ABC is that, no, it doesn't square with what was put to them in that letter. They were of the understanding that Four Corners were coming up here to do a balanced report that would show the work that they had done over the past couple of years since the old Don Dale Centre was closed down, basically looking at the work that John Elferink in particular had done, as was outlined in that letter that Four Corners sent, making improvements to that correctional facility and, in fact, implementing the 16 recommendations that were in the independent report by Michael Vida, a report that was commissioned by John Elferink after the Don Dale tear gassing incident.
But that's what I don't understand. They acknowledge in this letter that all these changes have been made, but when they put that show to air, they didn't say that. Now, let me go to another paragraph of the letter that just says this is a stitch-up. This is the ABC reporter, Carrie Meldrum Hanna, telling John Elferink to let the ABC into the detention centres, as you said, that had been denied initially, because closing the doors on her meant she could not give a voice to what she called the dedicated officers and staff who work very hard. Well, mate, in fact, this is how those officers were portrayed, as professional fighters as well as thugs. Have a look.
Four Corners has learnt the children were being cared for by a core group of prison officers, highly trained in professional fighting.
Mate, you know, one thing after another. This is pretty shoddy, isn't it?
Well, the government certainly thinks so, Andrew. It's interesting, Carrie Meldrum Hanna was on radio, on ABC Radio here in Darwin late yesterday, where she was responding to some of those allegations that had been made by Jeff Kennett in regards to this report. And in response to that actual issue about talking to guards, she says that John Elferink wanted to be the chief spokesman and the only spokesman for the Northern Territory government. I can tell you that I've spoken to several of the guards in the days and weeks since. Many of them are quite upset about the actions that they've been subjected to since. They've talked about being spat at, abused in public. There's even been talk of death threats. The Corrections Commissioner, Mark Payne, who you had on your program a couple of weeks ago, has spoken about some of his staff being threatened with baseball bats and even bomb threats that have been directed at corrections in the couple of weeks since. So it's certainly a bit of a sore point.
Mate, Matt Cunningham, thank you so much for your time.
No worries.